Avoid these three mistakes and own your story. My name is Tabitha Christopher of tabithachristopher.com. My company founded the Mind Style Makeover Bootcamp, also known as MSMBC. It is a character and resilience building training program that provides students in college, high school, and middle school with a roadmap to succeed academically, athletically, socially, and emotionally. I started on this journey of learning how to own my story a number of years ago. And I dove head in because of what kind and compassionate words that were spoken into me. They were kind, they were compassionate, but it definitely did light a fire under my booty. And those words were, what will happen to those who are in the situation that you survived and escaped? What about those that are in the same situation without hope? Who will die or be killed because you refuse to tell your story? And so I launched into the deep. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know heads or tails about how one should own their story. So there were three mistakes that I made right out the gate that, in so many ways, delayed healing and freedom that I didn't know at the time was for me to have. Let's just get right into it. So, mistake number one to avoid in order to help you to own your story. Mistake number one that I made was I not sharing sooner, not sharing the stories sooner. I didn't share the stories sooner because I believed that it wasn't going to help. It wasn't going to be of help to anyone, especially the ones that would be affected by my telling the stories. And I was afraid that if I opened up and shared what was going on behind closed doors, because on the outside, I believe we all are very good actors and actresses. We know how to put on face very well for society, for our friends, for our extended family members, for our peers, for our coworkers. We know how to dress up, make ourselves look amazing on the surface while struggling behind closed doors. And we learned that from what we saw emulated to us, whether it was through our parents at home, grandparents, aunts, uncles, or family at school. And then as we got older, the workforce, we learn how to put on face very well. We learn how to fake it to make it. And I was I was living that to the best of my ability. And I did a very good job at it. Most people had no idea of what the life that I was facing and behind closed doors, what was going on. So, first mistake was not sharing sooner. Because what happens when you share whatever challenge or difficulties that you're going through, when you share about it and you shed light on that problem, on those issues, the sooner it's going to, the sooner you're going to be able to, one, get the help that you need, or two, it's going to help to relieve the mental stress that's being built up within, right? You got it out, you got it out of you. So you're not carrying it around trying to figure out how do I how do I maintain this? How do I maintain all of this internal pressure, right? Oftentimes what ends up happening, what well, I'll tell you for myself. how I dealt with it was through extreme forms of exercise. Like I pushed my body to levels that were very dangerous. And I've shared multiple times. I came breaths away from having a heart attack at the age of 21. So when I say that I took exercise to a level that was not safe, this is what I mean. Exercise is not supposed to kill you or come close to killing you if it's done properly. And I wasn't using it in the best way. Some people may find themselves, in order to cope, they may choose to go to drugs. They may become addicted to food. They may become addicted to some other sort of substance. Some people become addicted to shopping. We would find ourselves trying to deflect away from the matter that we don't want to talk about, because oftentimes we may have questions about, I don't even know how to talk about it. But it's so much more simple than what I thought the process was going to be. So the mistake number one that I made was not sharing the stories sooner. In fact, I made a vow to myself at 8 years old. It was not just to myself, I made a vow to myself and to God. And I said, I would die before I share these stories. And in me making that vow, there was so much that took place in that moment that I'll get into in another chat that we're gonna have on here. So mistake number one again is not sharing the stories sooner. Mistake number two is not owning that the stories were mine. Yes. So once I started to share the stories, I put fictionalized names inside of my story, and in a way to try to keep it as far removed from me as possible. I wasn't ready to own it. I wasn't ready to own it. And some may say, well, you just weren't ready yet. You weren't at that place of where you could accept that these were facts. These are things that you went through and it was traumatic. I couldn't sit in it as yet. I wasn't ready. But what I've come to learn in retrospect, how they say, looking back, you have your 2020 vision. Well, what I learned in retrospect is that the moment that I owned those stories and I was like, yeah, these stories are actually stories from my childhood, not some made up character, which thank I'm so thankful to the audiences that I shared those stories with initially, that were patient enough and kind enough to allow me to go on this journey of discovery, right? But mistake number two, again, is not owning the stories as my own right away. And the benefit to owning the stories from the beginning is that they provide a pathway to engage in dialogue, to help one's present perspective to reframe core beliefs that held that person as a prisoner. I will personalize that statement. The moment that I owned those stories as my own, and I said on that stage, I said, okay, all of these stories that I've released, which I released an audiobook, The Love Circle, Secrets in Paradise, like back in 2014. I started writing the stories in 2013, released the audiobook in 2014. And on the day of the release, I announced on that stage, I said, all of these stories that I've been workshopping for the past year are my own stories. And the moment that I opened up and owned it, I invited in dialogue from incredible hearts of people who had the reason why they were coming back every single week and inviting more of their friends and inviting family to come, inviting coworkers to come. That theater was packed out. People were coming to hear the stories because they were relatable, they were real, and it touched each person's heart in a very special way, and where they could see themselves in moments of each story. And it was as if we were all going on an experience together. And it opened up for dialogue to happen, to engage in shifting my perspective around a lot of the pain that I had held on to. And I had a certain locked perspective around those incidents that kept me bound, that kept me as a victim to the pains of the past. But the moment I owned those stories and say, yeah, these are mine, these are all stories from my childhood, other people started opening up and sharing and engaging and pointing out some incredible, powerful, and positive moments within the stories, life lessons that I couldn't see because I was still blinded by so much hurt, by so much pain and unforgiveness, which leads me to mistake number 3 to avoid in order to own your story. Mistake number 3 is justifying my right to withhold forgiveness from the person that caused me the most pain. That was mistake number 3. And the reason why that's a huge mistake is because I have been forgiven so many times, and continuously I am in need of forgiveness. I don't have any right to withhold forgiveness from a single person, regardless of what they choose to do to me. Nah. So that's first. Okay. Second, unforgiveness permitted the anguish of past pains to continue to scar my mind, my heart, and rob me of good health. Those are the 3 mistakes to avoid in order to own your story. And there were so many more mistakes that I made that um, I'll share with you if you're interested in hearing them. But those were the 3 big ones out the gate when I first started sharing my story that I made initially. And like I said, there were many others along the way that I'm open to sharing with you if you're interested in learning. In my Mind Style Makeover Bootcamp, students are guided through the process of how to create their blueprint success legacy story, where they write out using techniques of script writing that's used in order to create like Hollywood blockbuster films. They get access to this same formatting of their story so that it it gets them excited every time they go back and revisit and read their story over and over again. Well, what's in their blueprint legacy success story? What's in the blueprint is the story that they've lived, their past, what's happening currently in their present, and what's the story they desire to create and be remembered for in their future. And then they are also given the guidance of what steps to take in order to make it come true. All in the Mind Style Makeover Bootcamp. And this curriculum was birthed from starting on this process of learning how to own my story. And this whole curriculum was encouraged by students, specifically started with middle school students. Then that principal that urged me to create this so that they would have that roadmap to thrive inside and outside the classroom. I'm going to share this quote from former student of a local school here in Pensacola that experienced phase 1 of my Mind Style Makeover Bootcamp. He said, education spends a lot of time harping on the academia and forgetting that we are whole humans. That if we have a whole lot of knowledge, but we but we're not healthy emotionally, or we don't know how to regulate our emotions. We don't know who we are. We don't, it's gonna, we're gonna be a whole lot of smart people with very little heart. And without the heart to care or to have compassion for one another, we will be living in a much colder world than what we're experiencing right now. So, in order to change this, we've got to deal with the heart of the matter, which connects to one's story. I want to thank you all so much for tuning in for our Mind Style Makeover Mondays chat right here on whatever platform you're tuning in on, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's YouTube, whether it's Instagram. If you want to catch any of our previous chats, if you enjoyed this one tonight, then just follow, subscribe on my YouTube channel for the ones that have come before and the ones that's going to come in the future. Continue to make this day as magnificent as you are. And remember, you're only one mind style makeover away from owning your story. I'll see you next week.